And you know what came up last commercial break? What would you rather be? And we'll ask Mike McAllister. Mike McAllister, would you rather be a hockey goalie, a lacrosse goalie, or a catcher in baseball? What one do you think would be the least painful?
Hockey goalie, because you get more padding, maybe? I don't know. I don't know that I could be a catcher because I wouldn't want to be squatting for that long. And a lacrosse goalie, you don't have much in terms of padding, so I feel like there's more of a chance of you getting pelted with a fastball, so to speak. I feel like a hockey goalie is probably the least from a pain tolerance standpoint.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and I think catcher in baseball, those dudes just take foul balls, and they're not as protected. No fun.
Yeah, 100%. And if you have a really good defense in hockey, you might not even see that many shots. So.
It's always the craziest kid when you're younger that's playing catcher or goalie in any sport, right?
That's true. I was actually a goalie in soccer when I was growing up. So
okay, well, next week I'll ask you, what do you think the hardest one to make a save in is? We'll do that next.
Okay. All right.
Well, let's talk some lacrosse though, Mike. And I know that you're fully invested in basketball and football and recruiting and so on and so forth. How invested are you in lacrosse, and how much do you pay attention to this team?
Yeah, I've watched every game all season. I think except for. I think they had one or two that were on the road that were like a pay-only subscription thing. Maybe it was at the Cornell game, maybe that was that way, if I'm remembering correctly. So there were one or two of the road games that I wasn't able to see, but the majority of them I've seen. The ACC tournament games I saw, and the NCAA tournament games I've watched. So, when my philosophy is if I've got interns that are covering the sport, I need to follow the sport and pay attention to it so that when I'm reading their work, I can tell whether or not what they're saying is accurate. And so when we've got men's and women's lacrosse beat writers that intern for me, so I watch as many of the games as I possibly can and pay attention to how they're doing. And this team has certainly had you on a roller coaster all year. Both NCAA tournament games kind of fit the bill for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, these last two games have been phenomenal. And really this stretch where they needed to beat Notre Dame at the ACC tournament to feel good about their tourney chances, and they haven't stopped winning since. And I guess that brings me to my next question, which is, they went through that stretch where they lost 3 in a row, all the good teams, Cornell, Duke, and Carolina, all in a row to close out the regular season. And now they've won, 4 in a row since then, and they're in the Final Four. Has anything changed in your mind from that losing streak to this winning streak, or was it just a case of maybe they're executing just a little bit better, and those other games could have gone either way, they just happened to go against them? I mean, how do you, I guess, resolve in your mind what has changed from the end of the regular season to where they are now?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, I think going through those, you learn things about your team, your approach to crunch time situations. And I keep thinking back to that North Carolina game, which kind of went similar to the Harvard game, except they closed it out against Harvard. And the fact that they went through that against North Carolina with that, furious comeback towards the end, I think helped them when they got to the Harvard game. Like, guys, we've been into situations like this before. We can come back. We just have to finish it when we do. And so I think those experiences helped. I think the fact that they got into lose and go home mode once they got to the ACC tournament, that, perhaps the focus and the energy and everything else kind of ramped up to another level. This team has always been, regardless of what happened during the regular season, it was always going to be judged on what it did in the postseason. They could have gone undefeated in the regular season, and if they didn't make the championship weekend, it was going to be viewed as a failure. So you kind of wonder if you get to the end of the regular season, you just kind of are like, all right, I'm done with this. I want to get to the games that we're here for, the ones that we've been thinking about since, the schedule came out. And it just feels like they've ramped up the intensity. They've learned from their past situations and, not only this year, but in past years, and sort of learning what it takes to win. And they've executed down the stretch of these last couple of games. I think all of that played into it.
The question came up earlier, if this season is a success, no matter what happens from here on out. I think that it is. I'm curious to get your thoughts as well. If they lose to Maryland, are you still looking at this season as a big success for this program?
I think so, because yes, I know historically just getting to championship weekend isn't the goal. The goal is to win the national championship, right? And I think if you asked any of the players and the coaches that's what they would tell you as well, that, hey, look, our goal isn't just to get here. Our goal is to win the whole thing. So I understand that some will view it not as a success because, if they don't win the whole thing. However, when you take a step back and think where this program has been over the last 12 years, the coaching change, the complete turnover of the roster under Gary Gait, all of the big-time recruits and players they've had come in, and those guys getting experience under Gary Gait, finally, exercising the demons of not being to the Final Four over the last 12 years, getting back there, I think it's a significant step forward. And so I would still view it as a successful season, but would certainly understand, if some fans and other people around the program would feel like, they left some meat on the bone if they don't finish it.
You look at Joey Spelina and, 4 goals, 4 assists in the most important, college game of his career to date. Was a scorer early on, and then Princeton made some adjustments, and then he turned into a feeder and had 8 points and was a big reason why they won. Can you, I guess, just speak to his greatness? I feel like we kind of take him for granted, or we've been taking him for granted because he's been here so long. But that performance on Saturday out of him in particular was phenomenal.
His feel for the game and ability to change his approach in a game is, I don't know how else to say it. It's amazing. It's extremely impressive. But like you said, he liked the matchup that he had early in the game in the first half, scores 4 goals in the first half, and looked like the best player on the field. And then Princeton completely changes its defense, makes an adjustment to take him out to limit his effectiveness. And so he changes his approach and lets all of his teammates get the success of finding the back of the net. And so he allows himself to open things up for his teammates, but then is also one of the best distributors, if not the best distributor in the country. So the fact that he's able to completely change his approach to the game mid-game like that, I don't think there's a lot of players that can do that. I think, you would see some try to force some of those shots after they had some success scoring early, and he doesn't and didn't do that. And I think that tells you just how good he is, just how intelligent he is. His lacrosse IQ is off the charts. And it tells you not only can he beat you in multiple ways, but this team has so many weapons that if you do focus your defensive energy on taking away Spelina's scoring ability, Syracuse still has the ability to put up a ton of points.
You look ahead now to Saturday, and we know that Syracuse is comfortable in an up-and-down game, and we saw that 19-18 even the week before against Harvard. A lot of goals were scored. It was fast-paced, and Syracuse is comfortable like that. This one is probably not going to be fast-paced, right? I mean, Maryland is very methodical. They slow you down. We saw it earlier this season, right, that they scored half their goals with under 10 seconds left in the shot clock. They're going to bleed the clock. They're going to try to wear you down. What do you make of this matchup? Because we know John Tillman's had SU's number, and the way that they play, I guess, how concerned are you about this particular opponent for Syracuse?
Well, first of all, just from an entertainment standpoint, I much prefer the way that the last 2 games have been played than the slow it down. It almost feels like Virginia basketball, right? Like you're watching paint dry is kind of the way you compare it. It's not as entertaining. It's not as fun as the up and down, lots of scoring, up tempo, et cetera. But it's worked very well for Maryland, so obviously they're not going to go away from it just because of the entertainment factor. But I think the fact that Syracuse has seen them before this year playing at Maryland early in the season, I think that helps because you've had exposure to it, you're used to it, you've seen it, especially this year. Whereas going from the last 2 games with those up-tempo games and then completely changing style of play in your next one without having previously seen that can be a little bit more difficult. What I think Syracuse has, where their advantage can be, is if they can play make it, take it, and get up tempo and get out to a multi-goal lead early because of the way that Maryland plays. A 3-4 goal lead against Maryland feels like 6-7 goals as opposed to, the 5-goal lead against Princeton didn't really feel like it was that huge of a gap because of the way that Princeton plays. So I think Syracuse has a chance to jump out early and kind of get Maryland out of rhythm and out of the way that they want to play. But we'll see. I mean, it's certainly going to be difficult. I think just from an entertainment stylistic standpoint, you probably would have preferred Georgetown if you're Syracuse, but you're going to have to play elite teams when you get to this point of the year. And everyone's good. Everyone's capable of beating everybody, and it should be a fun one. We'll have to see how Syracuse adjusts from the last time they played these guys.
Yeah, and you're right. And going back to the first one, Syracuse actually led that game at the half, and then Maryland was methodical and slowed it down, and were able to pull ahead and pull it out. But you're right. Beginning of that game is going to be so very important. You don't want to fall down multiple goals to this Maryland team because they'll have you right where they want you. All right, enough with the lacrosse talk. Before we let you go, anything football or basketball related that you want to make our listeners aware of?
Yeah, just one note. We put up on the site an update on five-star wide receiver Calvin Russell. He, for those who are unfamiliar, he plays for Miami Northwestern High School in Florida. He came up to visit Syracuse for their spring game. He could have gone to Miami, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, etc. He didn't. He came up to Central New York instead, much further from home. He was at Florida this past weekend for an official visit. He has not made his official visit schedule public. He's kept that very close. He just kind of pops up wherever he's going to be. He knows where he's going, but they're keeping a lot of that stuff close to the vest. But Syracuse is very involved in that recruitment. They're heavily involved. They've been recruiting him extremely hard, and they do still have a real chance to land him, despite the fact that he has family ties to Florida. Both of his uncles, a couple of his uncles played there, and then his mom played basketball at Miami. Both of those schools are recruiting him extremely hard. They're obviously much closer to home, but Syracuse still has a very realistic shot of landing him. They just got to figure out when to get him up, probably at some point next month, and see what type of an impression they can make. But they're certainly very involved there.
Hey, Mike, I just want to hit one thing, and maybe we've hit on it before, but last week there was controversy that Alan Griffin's going to coach the TBT team and Miss Peach Jam. What effect do you think that would have on recruiting overall, that one of the coaches won't be there, but the rest of the staff will?
Well, I can certainly understand, the concern about how it appears that basically you have an assistant coach that's expendable and doesn't need to be there during an important recruiting time. But at the same time, as plenty have pointed out, Syracuse is only allowed to have so many people on the road anyway. He will be available to be there for other weekends and will be, front and center and certainly be seen. So the fact that he's not there for, one weekend, is that ultimately going to determine whether or not they get whatever high-profile recruit that's participating in those? I don't know that I have a way to quantify that, but Coach Autry will be there. They'll have other assistants and Alex Klein, et cetera, there. So Syracuse will still have a full contingent on site to be seen by recruits. So, the hope is, if you're a Syracuse fan, that it ultimately won't have much of an effect, if any, on Syracuse's recruiting efforts in the 2026 and 2027 classes.
One more thing for you. Another thing I've seen lately is that Coach Griff hasn't landed any recruits since Kadari Richmond. And I asked you about this earlier in the week. How does Syracuse report to the media when they land a recruit, who the lead recruiter is?
Yeah, so the way it used to be was, who the lead recruiter was known in one way or another, whether it was passed along from the recruits or whether it was passed along from sources within the program. And so if you look at 24/7 Sports or Rivals or, whatever recruiting service you're looking at, oftentimes they'd have the primary recruiter listed for these players. If you look at Syracuse in the last couple of recruiting classes, for example, they don't have anyone listed, because the mantra of the coaching staff is that every recruitment is a coaching staff recruitment. Regardless of who is the primary point of contact, everyone on staff is, putting effort in trying to recruit everybody that they get after. So I think there's less concern about giving one individual the credit as the primary, as opposed to, this was a recruit that the program landed, the coaching staff landed.
Got it.
Mike, we have you on every week. We very rarely remind people how they can consume your content. So where should people go to consume more of your content?
If you want to check out our website, it's CuseNation.com. That is the easiest way just to see the website and the content and check out our message boards and all of that. And then you can find me on Twitter at McAllisterMike1. Our website also has a Twitter account at SyracuseOn247. I am also on Blue Sky under the same name, and I'm also on Threads and Instagram. If you search Mike McAllister, you'll find me pretty easily. Same profile picture. Bios are pretty similar and all of that. So you'll see me on all of those platforms.
All right. So lots of different ways to consume the content. Mike, great stuff as always. We appreciate you coming on. Have a good week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Mike McAllister joining us here on the show, Paulie.
Because I had seen that a lot, Steve, the tweets of he hasn't gotten anybody since Kadari. And then I was like, on every recruiting site said the same thing. And I was like, man, that is terrible for Griff. Like, what's going on? And then I text Mike and I said, how come he hasn't? And he said it's because they don't announce who the lead recruiter is on anybody, and you can't find it anywhere. Right. So I just wanted to clear that up because anybody that Googled it like I did was like, damn, how's this guy still got a job right now?
Yeah. Right.
You know, so.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll hit our final timeout here in hour number 1. We've got Tim Leonard set to join us at the top of hour number 2. We're back after this on ESPN Radio.